I was diagnosed, I thought I was the only child in New Zealand that had type 1 diabetes purely because of the adult clinic that I was put into in Lower Hutt. I quickly learned that wasn't the case when we said something and I was moved into a children's clinic. But lived down in Wellington. I have 2 wonderful children, despite having type 1 diabetes. 13-year-old Olive, 7-year-old Felix don't have diabetes. But in that time, busy trying to do all the things, that the mantra of not letting it slow me down. However, midway through, realising that I had to kind of let that guard down, burnt out, started from scratch again, started using diabetes technology and have become an advocate for ensuring that everyone else has access to this technology. So next week's pretty exciting. And when it comes to my diabetes and this panel, I am an open book. So please, any questions, I look forward to it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lelea and I'm 23, and I've had diabetes for 16 years. I was diagnosed when I was 7, and I was born here in Aotearoa, but I was raised in America where I was diagnosed. And I've luckily enough for me, I got to grow up at an early age having a pump by the time I was 8. So I was very privileged to have that given to me, thanks to my mother. She gave me a pump at an early stage, so it made life a whole lot easier before having it. Having to take needle injections every single time and prick my fingers every moment. It was just like it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun in the beginning, but as technology progressed over the years, things started getting better, and uh, it just made life a whole lot easier as a type 1 diabetic. Um, and yeah, that's a little bit of my story.
Similar to Ruby, actually, I was diagnosed around about the same age in Auckland in 1999 when I was 14. And what I didn't do, like in terms of, wanting to do things differently earlier on, I basically learnt about continuous glucose monitors about 6 or 7 years ago when I started using my first one. And that made my life a whole lot easier. Like, there was less guesswork. I knew what my sugars were. I could plan my day. And then moving to pumps has just made life a lot easier. I spend a lot less time worrying about my diabetes. It's a lot easier to let it do its own thing from time to time, with the security that you won't get severe hypoglycemia or severe hyperglycemia. And with each, like, it's good to take a historical perspective about these things, because with each successive development in technology, what I anticipate is, yes, there will be challenges, and there are challenges with AID and CGM as well. But gradually, life will get easier.
Firstly, I think the access to funding means all of a sudden everyone has access to the same technology. We were heading down that slippery slope of a 2-tier system, and you either had money and could afford better health outcomes or you couldn't. So that's an exciting first step. The benefits, I think, it's those little things that we underestimate. It's that full night's sleep, being able to show up for your family and friends, again, knowing that your blood sugars are kind of ticking along, and that if I'm going to go low, that I'm going to potentially be able to jump onto that and prevent that without crumbling down here with my children who are trying to play. So it's those really little things. And potentially because of that, I know I'm braver. I'm braver to join that netball team. I'm braver to put my hand up for an opportunity that maybe I might not have felt as brave to. So I think that's a huge part for the community. And when you think about what those differences then mean for our whānau, our community, the people we know, it's so much more than just this bit of technology. It's huge.
I think as a young person and all of the future type 1 diabetics or the type 1 diabetics that are at the moment trying to get a better stable lifestyle, especially before without having it, it's kind of like you're shooting in the dark, having to test uh, every single time, and especially as a young person who's always going out, like it's very awkward when you're hanging out with your friends, and then you're like, "Oh wait, I gotta test my blood sugar in front of a whole group of friends," and they're like just looking at you and just waiting for you to test.
You don't do it, do you?
Sometimes, yeah. Most of the times, you kind of just like, "Oh, no, it should be all good. Do it later." But now that you can see the patterns that's on your phone or on your pump, you can anticipate when your blood sugars are going to go high, go low, just like what you said. It makes life so much better. But not only that, it prevents you from having getting a hypo state where you could eventually like pass out, like you could feel really tired. And if you don't have any awareness of where your blood sugars is at, just because you just base it off of feeling, it's not a good it's not a good state to be in. But if you can see it, visually see it, you know where you're at. And I know it's a perfect way for someone to manage diabetes is being able to see how your blood sugars work before you eat something, before you go out, before you almost any activity you could think of. You can prepare for it. You can prepare for it. So yeah. What? Yeah. Go ahead.
How things like that even all the time and taking a few times a day because it has to be on.
Yeah, it has to be on. There's
Otherwise, thinking that
absolutely, if you don't position it in a certain way, it can easily come off and you have to put it all back on again. But uh did you say like how does it feel having all the time? It, for doing it so long, it feels like second nature. I know a lot of people look at me funny when I tell them.
I sometimes I'll be walking around there and think, hold on, where is it? Where? And I think, oh, and it's still clipped, but it's become that comfortable.
So the continuous glucose monitors, all of the funded types are waterproof. So like the I think with I think all three of us, you're all Control-IQ users there. So the continuous glucose monitors we use are basically completely waterproof. So it can go in a pool, in the ocean. You can swim with it. Nothing will happen. It will still transmit the same glucose levels. Pumps, on the other hand, require a bit of forward planning. None of the currently funded pump types are waterproof, so you do need to take them off for a shower. You just need to be mindful of how long you're off pump for before maybe stepping out and reconnecting and seeing what your sugars are and either eating or maybe giving a wee bolus. But with the awareness, like the physical or the tactile awareness of the devices, like these devices are quite small, and the discomfort as such is only, for most people, only at insertion. So with these sensors lasting 10 to 14 days, by day 1.5 or so, you barely notice it's there. They're not sort of lumpy or bulky in terms of the continuous glucose monitors that you would knock them off. Pumps, on the other hand, because they're slightly bigger and potentially a bit more awkward, you do need to basically be aware of where they are. And people with any chronic illness, people with diabetes adapt. So there are clothing lines now that actually make pump holes, like for me, having to wear formals to work was a big challenge. So I got a friendly neighborhood tailor to drill a buttonhole so I could put my pump wire through without sort of having to get all disconnected every time I went to the loo. So technology and the way people respond to technology, what we call digital integration, which is something that actually came up in our qualitative studies, will evolve the more we use these devices. So people will find ingenious ways of integrating these devices into their lives.
What I am seeing with the way that an insulin pump and a CGM are working together is it takes some of that massive load, and there is with this technology, potentially, say I never tested, I forgot to bolus, it was just due to my lifestyle at that time or the things I'm navigating. The insulin pump allows, you're going to be continually delivered insulin. Then all of a sudden, when I've missed giving insulin for that meal because I was just busy or I just actually couldn't be bothered, whatever, it doesn't matter what the reason was. The fact is that insulin pump's going to kick in and it's going to deliver an amount of insulin to bring that back in range. So these, I think, will change the way we look at that, because sometimes, especially in those adolescent years, or if you're going through a really rough patch or whatever you're navigating, it's about how can we use this technology to get you through this safely, and whether that's months, years, until you are in a position when we're saying, now I've come up for air and now I'm ready to own this and look what that looks like. So I think this is really, really exciting that it's available, because I think it would hugely help. With a continuous glucose monitor, so they can be, you need a special authority, and that can be prescribed through your GP or seeing your diabetes team or your endocrinologist. And you could make an assumption, and I know that's a huge assumption, that if you were connecting with your diabetes team, they might know a little bit more about your situation than your GP. However, with an insulin pump, again, that's my understanding is, again, organised by your diabetes team, and part of accessing an insulin pump is insulin pump training. So there is more of a wraparound support for that, and the criteria being for both of those now is just simply type 1 diabetes. Thinking about the massive inequities we have, and we know we've got a system that's been created for this rollout, but we know already that there will be populations, including our Māori and Pacifica, where that relationship isn't with those go-to people, and it needs to be where we've got those relationships to teach and to empower, and then potentially to either guide them through to the next stage. But you're right, it's really crucial that then the people that are having those connections are empowered to know how to support or how to wrap that around to get them to where they need to be, so they have access to this. The 1st of October, isn't it, is our go date. We finally have access, but we know that then, potentially we'll have a cohort and we'll get through, use it, and then hopefully we're brave enough, we have the systems, to say, now how do we get everybody else?
How do we reach the others?
Absolutely,
I totally see you transitioning to a certain group. There they go.
Yeah.
Still.
Oh, and we can't lose sight, and that's a real concern. Yeah.
I'm Tongan, and having type 1 having been diagnosed at an early age, I was really rebellious in the early stages. It took me a while for me to get a good grip on my diabetes, because at the time I was I was just eating carbs galore and not caring about my blood sugars too much. Thankfully, my body bounced back, and I never had to go through any of the complications that come from doing that. And I had 2 cases where I almost died, and those were wake-up calls for me. The last one was when I turned 12, where I found myself at the hospital, and I had a deep conversation with my doctors and nurses. It was a real wake-up call. So I don't know if more stories like that goes out to the Māori and Pacifica community. They need to be taught that these, whether you're type 1 or type 2, these complications are real. You will lose your sight. You will lose limbs, your fingers, your sense of touch. It's scary, some scary stuff. And I've been just so blessed and thankful that that's nothing that I had to go through. But I know with this blood glucose monitor, it's helped me so much. It's helped me so much after realizing that taking care of my blood sugars is taking care of my overall health.
When you are diagnosed as a 14-year-old, 7-year-old, I don't know. I just want to be like my friends. I don't want to have to test in front of everyone. I don't want to miss out. So potentially straight away, we're hearing, well, actually, this technology, we can support you with that. And I appreciate the thoughts about how to avoid the long-term complications. I remember hearing that there was a teenager and I didn't want to. And it was, so again, but what that comes down to is everyone's different, isn't it? What is their why? And actually, to avoid that, so I'm here for my mokopuna. But this technology can play such a massive part, especially when we're doing the rebellious teenage stuff, because actually we're not doing anything wrong. We're not being naughty. We're just, again, how do we get through this part safely?
There's good evidence. In fact, this was like one of the small studies that our group in Dunedin, the group that I was doing my PhD with, did. We had 20 individuals with really challenging diabetes control. These were a lot of the people that you see in clinic that don't attend, basically. Their average HbA1c was in the early hundreds. In fact, the most memorable individual patient was a guy who they couldn't actually, like, every time his result came back, it was higher than the upper limit of normal in terms of his HbA1c. Going on to one of these devices, this is an automated insulin delivery device, closed loop. Within about 3 months, we were able to get him from had HbA1c so high that the lab wouldn't measure it to an HbA1c of 65, which is just a few notches above target. And he wasn't doing anything, he wasn't particularly more engaged with his diabetes. He was just wearing his device and changing the sensor and sites every 10 days. 7 days, and 3 days with this particular device. He was occasionally bolusing for meals. And just with that, with the potential for this integrated device being able to cope with the highs and prevent the lows, your control improves. So even with people with challenging control, if you can get them engaged, these devices are useful. Primary care education of how to get the most out of continuous glucose monitoring is something that in the current framework that Pharmac has left to the device companies themselves. However, what I see in the future is more of a primary-secondary interaction where, we can do focused primary care provider, nurse specialists, practice nurse educations about learning how to interpret what's on a CGM report, which is what we do in secondary care, what the patterns mean, what interventions are more appropriate. And that's training that we can easily impart to our primary care colleagues so that together with your patients, as a team, you become experts in managing their type 1 diabetes. Because as my colleague said, like the first persons with diabetes, first point of contact is usually primary care. And so if we can improve their primary care experience, we may find that, we're less of the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff in secondary care.
I know with funding here in Aotearoa, the long-term goal has always been CGM for all, all people with diabetes, that it would be useful too. It's another tool in the kitty that they can use, but also being realistic about what could we, get across the line. Made sense to focus on type 1 to start with, but absolutely there is a role, I think, for this kind of technology in the type 2 space. Yeah. I think about my dad has type 2 diabetes, and he was doing some extra testing for get his HbA1c down, and of course, didn't like any of that. So he used a Libre for a part, and not only was he able to test more, but some incredible experiences with his food, that he could finally see that, actually what's happening, and then make different choices. And yeah, it was brilliant. So absolutely.
Continuous glucose monitors in type 2 diabetes, it's like a growing research field. The importance of using CGM for type 2 is sort of at multiple different levels. When you first get diagnosed, it's a great education tool. It can tell you, if I eat this or if I do this amount of exercise, my sugar will rise or fall by this much. When you intensify your therapy, it can show you the impact of therapy. It's like, oh, this is what taking one extra pill or adding this pill to my other pill does. It can also make you feel safer. It can help you prevent hypoglycemia. So you can be a bit braver sometimes. And then sort of clinical inertia is one of those things that, especially treating with people with type 2 diabetes, we used to fear. There's less, so CGM can play a vital role. At this stage, there's less of a role for automated insulin delivery because of the difference in nature of the two disorders, type 1 and type 2 diabetes. But definitely you would want to get more exposure to CGM and type 2 diabetes, both as a learning tool, but also as a tool for increased monitoring and for helping keep these individuals safer with their diabetes. When these devices were not funded, a Libre device, a Libre sensor, is about $100, like one sensor lasts a fortnight, it's about $100. The Dexcom ONE Plus, which is real similar, but lasts slightly less long, is about $87, $88 a fortnight. The higher end real-time continuous glucose monitors, they are close to $400 a month, so $370, $380. But the advantage of having like a bulk bargaining contract like Pharmac is that the cost doesn't come through to you to the same degree. You'll be funded for not only like the number that you need, but also spares. So sensors fail, sensors get knocked off. You get allergic reactions to the adhesives of one type of sensor. You might need to change sensors. So at this stage, the amount that you're going to get prescribed is about 10 or 15% in excess of what you would need for the year. So that's one of the more practical things. The newer devices are watch integrable. So that makes that's impactful for adolescents, rangatahi, not wanting to have their diabetes more visible. You can actually just look at your glucose levels on your watch, which is a more private thing, rather than having to look at your phone or bending down to look at your pump. So that sort of aspect of digital integration is also improving with these technologies.